Amanda's voice cut through the laughter like a blade of glass slicing into silk. "You're such a useless old woman." Her words didn't just echo, they lodged in my chest. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The children were still giggling in the other room, unaware of how one sentence had shifted the entire atmosphere of Christmas morning. I stood up from the dinner table, my hands trembling not from weakness but from fury I rarely allowed myself to show. I looked Amanda straight in the eye and said, as calmly as I could, "Then stop calling me when you need money." The silence that followed was so heavy it could have shattered ornaments off the tree. But before I tell you what happened next, before the moment when I had no choice but to dial 911, let me take you back to the beginning of that morning. Because Christmas didn't start with cruelty. It started with hope. I'm Margaret Foster, though everyone calls me Maggie. At 67, I thought I had seen every shade of family drama possible, from petty sibling rivalries to years of silence that only broke at funerals. I believed I'd grown immune to surprises. I was wrong. That morning, I woke up with a flutter in my chest, the same kind of nervous excitement I hadn't felt in years. My son, Brian, had invited me to spend Christmas with his family. Over the last few years, invitations had been scarce, always dressed in polite excuses. "The kids are busy. Amanda's parents are visiting. We're keeping it small this year." So, when Brian actually insisted I join them, I let myself believe that maybe things were changing. Maybe this Christmas would be different. I arrived at their suburban Denver home at exactly 10 a.m., balancing a tray of my famous apple crisp in one arm and a bag of carefully wrapped presents in the other. The cold nipped at my cheeks, but inside the house, warmth and the smell of cinnamon and pine wrapped around me like an embrace. Christmas music floated softly from the speakers, Bing Crosby crooning about a white Christmas, the kind of detail that makes you think everything will be just as it should. Grandma Maggie, Emma, 14 and still carrying the last notes of childhood in her voice, rushed to hug me at the door. Her arms were thin but strong, and her eyes sparkled the way only a teenager's can when they're still innocent enough to love openly. Jake followed behind. At 16, he tried his best to maintain the armor of teenage coolness, but he couldn't hide the smile tugging at his lips as he relieved me of the heavy gifts. He was becoming a man, but in that moment, he was still my grandson. Brian wrapped me in a warm hug, strong and familiar. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with sincerity. And for a heartbeat, I thought, yes, this is family, this is home. Then Amanda appeared. My daughter-in-law stood in the doorway of the kitchen, her smile as polished as the silver ornaments dangling from the tree. "Margaret," she said, arms open but her tone clipped, rehearsed. "So glad you could make it. The kids have been asking about you all morning." Her words were right, her tone was wrong, and in that instant, I should have known that the day was a stage, and Amanda, the director of a play where I would always be cast as the unwelcome guest. Still, I brushed it off. I wanted to believe. The first few hours were perfect, or at least they seemed so. The children unwrapped their gifts with squeals of delight, Emma twirling in her new scarf, Jake grinning at his video game. I laughed, I clapped, I felt useful. In the kitchen, Amanda and I moved side by side, preparing the feast. For a moment, I allowed myself to think we were building something together. "Margaret," she said casually, pulling the turkey from the oven, "could you grab the desserts from the counter?" I glanced over. Pumpkin pie, chocolate cake, a store-bought apple tart but no apple crisp. "Where's my dish?" I asked, checking the other counters. "Oh, that," she said, waving her hand as though brushing away crumbs. "I put it in the pantry. We have so much food already, and honestly, Brian mentioned store-bought desserts are just easier for cleanup." Her words were light, but the dismissal was sharp. 30 years of tradition, Jake's favorite, Emma's comfort food. The dessert I made every Christmas morning since Brian was little, pushed aside like clutter. I kept my voice level. "I've been making that crisp for decades. Jake always asks for it." Amanda shrugged, her smile tightening. "Well, people's tastes change." The sting was deep, but I swallowed it. Family peace is a delicate fabric, and sometimes you sacrifice your own thread to keep it intact. But something in her tone, the way she brushed aside my effort, my history, my love, made me push back. "Amanda, I spent 3 hours making that crisp yesterday. The least you could do is serve it." That was when her mask slipped. The sweet hostess vanished, and something colder, sharper, took her place. 3 hours? She repeated, her voice rising. 3 hours to make a dessert nobody even asked for? This is exactly the problem, Margaret. You just assume your presence, your input, your traditions matter here. And in that instant, I realized the day had not begun with hope. It had begun with a test, and Amanda was about to make sure I failed it. The kitchen went silent, except for the faint bubbling of gravy on the stove. Amanda's words, sharp, deliberate, hung in the air like smoke that refused to clear. I stared at her, trying to piece together how we had arrived here. For decades, I had carried the apple crisp into every family Christmas, just as my mother had before me. It wasn't just dessert. It was memory baked into oats and cinnamon. It was Brian as a boy, licking the spoon when he thought I wasn't looking. It was Jake, wide-eyed at 5 years old, declaring, "Grandma makes the best in the world." But to Amanda, it was nothing, worse than nothing. It was a nuisance, an embarrassment, something she shoved into the pantry like clutter too ugly to display. "Amanda," I said, quieter now, "I brought it because that's what family does. We share what we love. I've been bringing dessert to family dinners longer than you've been part of this family." Her eyes flashed. The smile she usually wore for the world was gone, replaced by something raw, sharper. "Longer than I've been part of this family? Is that supposed to mean something?" she hissed. "Because let me tell you what I know about family, Margaret. Family doesn't show up unannounced and rearrange my refrigerator. Family doesn't criticize how we raise our children, and family certainly doesn't expect to be worshipped just because they're old." Each word hit like a slap. I opened my mouth to protest, but she wasn't finished. She stepped closer, her voice dropping into a harsh whisper. "You think I don't notice? Last month, you put away the groceries and reorganized everything like we were incompetent. 2 weeks ago, you told Brian that Jake needs more structure, implying we don't know how to parent. You think you're helping, but you're just controlling." Her accusations rattled through me. I wanted to shout. I was trying to make things easier. I was trying to help. But deep down, I realized she had been cataloging every kindness as ammunition, waiting for this very moment. "And then there are the gifts," she added, her tone cutting like glass. "All those little presents that come with invisible strings. Do you think I don't know? The money you slip Brian when you think I'm not watching? Those little loans you never expect to be repaid? Do you think we don't feel it? Do you think we don't see how you use money to buy your way into this family?" Her words pierced deeper than any insult she could have invented, because that was the one place she aimed true. Not because it was my intention, but because I couldn't deny the ache I felt whenever my sacrifices went unnoticed. I gave freely, yes, but hadn't I also expected gratitude? Hadn't I felt stung when it wasn't offered? I steadied myself against the counter, my throat dry. "Amanda, I give because I love Brian and the children. I never wanted anything back." "No," she snapped. "You give because it makes you feel needed. It gives you power over us. And when we don't dance to your tune, you pull out the guilt trips, reminding us about the braces you paid for, the summer camp, the mortgage payment. You keep a running tab in your head, Margaret, and you use it." Her voice cracked with anger, but her eyes glittered with something else. Triumph. She believed she had unmasked me, exposed me as a manipulator disguised as a grandmother. For a moment, I felt like a stranger in that house. The warmth of cinnamon and pine had turned into the sterile chill of judgment. I was no longer Maggie, the grandmother who baked, the mother who sacrificed, the woman who carried family traditions. I was the intruder, the useless old woman taking up space. From the dining room, laughter still floated in. Brian was telling a story. The kids giggled. They had no idea that, just steps away, Christmas was unraveling. I wanted to retreat, to swallow the insult and let the moment pass. But then, Emma's voice carried from the other room. "Grandma always makes the best apple crisp." My throat tightened. For Emma, that dish wasn't just dessert. It was love. It was consistency in a world that shifted too fast. I turned back to Amanda. "You can mock me all you want," I said quietly, "but don't erase what matters to them." Her lips curved into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. She brushed past me with a plate of perfectly carved turkey, her words like a dagger as she went. Not every tradition needs to be preserved, Margaret, especially not the old ones. And just like that, I realized this wasn't about apple crisp. It wasn't about food at all. It was about erasure, about Amanda rewriting the script of this family until my name, my traditions, my presence no longer fit. When we sat down for dessert, she lied as easily as she breathed. "Oh, Grandma didn't bring apple crisp this year, honey. But look at this chocolate cake, your favorite." For a heartbeat, even I doubted myself. But Jake, sharp-eyed and stubborn like his father once was, frowned. "That's not true. I saw it in the pantry." Amanda's smile faltered. She tightened her grip on the cake knife. "Sit down, Jake. We're having what's on the table." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Emma glanced at me, confused. Brian cleared his throat and looked away. And in that moment, I knew. This war wasn't about desserts. It was about survival, whether I still had a place in this family or whether Amanda had already won. Dinner resumed as if nothing had happened. Amanda slid back into her role of perfect hostess, smiling brightly, offering extra potatoes, asking Brian about work. To anyone looking in from the outside, she was gracious, warm, effortless. But beneath the table, I felt the tension radiating off her like heat from a closed oven. Every glance she cast at me was sharp, deliberate, a reminder that she held the stage now, and I was no longer part of the script. Brian chatted cheerfully about office projects, oblivious. Emma described a school play she wanted to audition for, her words tumbling out in bursts of excitement. Jake mostly stayed quiet, pushing food around his plate, his eyes darting from his mother to me, as if he sensed the invisible rope being pulled tighter around my throat. The meal should have been joyful, clinking glasses, shared laughter, children showing off new gifts, but for me, every bite tasted like cardboard. The Christmas table had become a battlefield, dressed in linen and china. When dessert arrived, the true wound opened. "Grandma, aren't you going to have any apple crisp?" Emma asked, her face lit with genuine anticipation. Before I could respond, Amanda's voice rang out, smooth as silk. "Oh, Grandma didn't bring apple crisp this year, sweetheart. But look at this beautiful chocolate cake, your favorite." The lie was effortless. The kind of lie that sounded so natural, you wanted to believe it. For a moment, even I wondered if maybe I had imagined the hours in my kitchen, the peeling of apples, the scent of cinnamon filling my apartment. Maybe I had dreamed it. But Jake leaned forward, his teenage certainty piercing through Amanda's facade. "That's not true. I saw the dish in the pantry when I grabbed napkins. Grandma made it, the one with the crumbly oat top." Amanda's smile tightened just slightly, but enough for me to see the crack in her mask. "That's just leftovers from earlier in the week. Nothing special." "Can we have some anyway?" Jake pressed, starting to rise from his chair. "Sit down, Jake." The sudden steel in her voice silenced the room. Emma froze, her fork in midair. Even Brian looked up, puzzled. Amanda smoothed her expression quickly and let out a brittle laugh. "We're having what's on the table, darling. Christmas is chaotic enough without adding more dishes." The lie was complete, the manipulation sealed. Jake slumped back, frustrated but obedient. Emma looked at me with confusion, silently asking for an explanation I couldn't give. And Brian, my son, the boy I had raised to see truth, simply nodded, too accustomed to smoothing over discomfort to notice the violence hidden in her smile. I felt it then, not just anger, but a deeper, colder realization. This wasn't about dessert. This was about erasure. Every tradition I had built, every ritual that tied me to my son and grandchildren, Amanda was quietly dismantling. She wasn't simply rejecting my apple crisp. She was rewriting the family's story, one gathering at a time, until my role no longer existed. I thought back to the past year. Birthdays I hadn't been invited to, Thanksgivings spent just with Amanda's side, school events I learned about only after seeing photos online. At first, I had believed the excuses, small gatherings, busy schedules, but now I saw the pattern. This wasn't absence, it was removal. After dinner, I offered to help in the kitchen. My real hope was a moment alone with Brian, a chance to pull him aside and ask if he saw what was happening. But Amanda was a strategist. With military precision, she dispatched Brian to the garage with Jake, sent Emma upstairs to sort her gifts, and left me alone with her, the hum of the dishwasher filling the silence. She didn't waste time. She set down a stack of plates with a clang and turned to me, her eyes blazing. "I suppose you're proud of yourself," she said coldly. "That little scene at dinner, making me look bad in front of the children, very mature." "I wasn't trying to make you look bad," I replied, my voice unsteady. "I just don't understand why you're doing this. Why you want to erase me from their lives." Amanda laughed, not with humor, but with derision. "Erase you? Margaret, let's be clear. This is my family, my home, my children. Brian is my husband, and I decide what this family looks like, not you." Her words hit harder than any insult. In her voice, there was no room for me. No space for the grandmother who had rocked Jake to sleep as a baby, who had saved for Emma's summer camp, who had stood beside Brian through every heartbreak and triumph. "You can't just cut me out," I whispered. "They're still my son, my grandchildren." "You think they need you?" she spat. "You're 70 years old, living alone in that apartment. The only reason anyone tolerates you is because you write checks. Do you really believe anyone wants you here otherwise?" The cruelty was breathtaking. It wasn't a slip of the tongue, it was deliberate, sharpened like a knife. And for the first time, I saw Amanda without her mask, without her performance. Possessive, ruthless, determined to own my family completely. And I knew then, this wasn't a clash of personalities, this was a war. Her words, "The only reason anyone tolerates you is because you write checks," didn't just sting, they hollowed me out. I had spent years convincing myself that the money I gave was love made tangible, that the braces I paid for were smiles given freely, that the mortgage payments were shelter offered from the storms of life. I told myself I wasn't buying their affection. I was protecting them, supporting them, ensuring their happiness. But Amanda's words stripped away the veil. To her, I wasn't a mother or grandmother. I was a wallet with wrinkles. For a moment, I swayed, as if the ground itself had shifted beneath me. But then something unexpected rose inside me. Not despair, not pleading, but clarity. A fierce, surprising clarity, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "If that's what you think," I said quietly, "then things will change." Amanda frowned, as though she hadn't anticipated defiance. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, setting down the dish in my hands, "that if my place in this family is only financial, then let's treat it like the business arrangement you clearly think it is. No more gifts. No more emergency loans. No more checks slipped into Brian's pocket. From now on, if you need money, you'll ask directly. But don't expect me to buy my way into this house anymore." For the first time since I had known her, Amanda looked unsettled. Her confidence flickered, and I saw something like fear creep across her face. "You're being ridiculous," she snapped. "That's not what It's exactly what you said," I cut in. My voice was calm, but firm. "And I believe you." That night, I chose not to stay for coffee or to linger for the pretense of family closeness. Instead, I gathered my coat, lifted the untouched dish of apple crisp from the pantry, and announced I was leaving. The protests were automatic. Brian insisted it was too early. Emma begged me to stay and play another round of board games. Even Amanda, with her perfect hostess mask back in place, murmured, "Oh, but at least stay for more dessert." But I saw it, the flicker of relief in her eyes. She had won. She had driven me to the door without raising her voice in front of Brian or the children. I hugged Jake and Emma, breathing them in like I might never get another chance. Then I kissed Brian on the cheek, looked into his kind but oblivious eyes, and wondered how he had become so blind to the woman he had married. "I'll see you soon," I said softly, though in my heart I knew it wouldn't be soon at all. The night outside was cold, the streets lined with Christmas lights and inflatable Santas waving from front yards. As I drove slowly back to my apartment, I passed window after window filled with glowing families, children tearing into gifts, couples clinking glasses, laughter spilling into the night. But I knew better than most. Sometimes those glowing windows hid fractures as deep as mine. Families fracture quietly, like glass under pressure, until the shatter is inevitable. When I reached my apartment, I placed the apple crisp on the counter, untouched. The kitchen felt small, the silence heavy. I brewed tea and sat at the table, staring at the dessert that was supposed to bind us together and had instead become a symbol of everything I had lost. For the first time in years, I picked up a pen and made a list. Not of groceries or chores, but of debts. Every dollar I had given Brian and Amanda, the braces, the summer camp, the mortgage payment, the loans never repaid, the gift cards handed over on holidays, the emergencies that drained my savings in the name of family. The total was staggering, more than I had ever allowed myself to calculate. More, in fact, than I could afford if I wanted to keep living with dignity in retirement. But it wasn't the number that broke me. It was the truth behind it. I had been mistaking obligation for love, silence for respect, tolerance for closeness. That night, with Christmas lights still twinkling faintly through my window, I made a decision. I would stop. No more buying a seat at the table. No more sacrificing my dignity for scraps of belonging. Family was supposed to be built on love, not transactions. And if Amanda wanted to reduce me to a checkbook, then I would close it. I didn't know then how far she would go to hold on to her control. I didn't know that, before the week was out, the police would be knocking on my door. But I knew this. I would never again let anyone decide my worth for me. I had barely finished writing down the final number on my list when my phone rang. Brian's name flashed across the screen. For a moment, my heart softened. Maybe he had noticed my absence. Maybe he wanted to apologize. But when I answered, his voice was rushed, panicked. "Mom, thank God you picked up. Amanda's called the police. They're here now. She says you threatened her." I sighed. The pen slipped from my hand. "What?" "She told them you said you'd cut off contact with the family, that you scared her. They want to speak with you." The room seemed to tilt. My own daughter-in-law, the woman I had just shared a Christmas meal with, was painting me as dangerous, unhinged. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in my living room across from Officer Patricia Wells, a calm woman in her 40s whose eyes told me she'd seen every kind of family disaster. "Mrs. Foster," she began, notebook poised, "your daughter-in-law claims you made threatening statements, that your behavior today was erratic. Can you tell me your version?" I almost laughed. Threatening? Me? But I swallowed the bitter humor and forced myself to speak evenly. "Officer, what I told Amanda was simple. If our relationship is only financial, then let's treat it that way. No more pretending. If she needs money, she can ask. But I will not keep subsidizing a family that resents me." Officer Wells's brow furrowed slightly, but she kept writing. "What kind of financial help are we talking about?" I slid the paper across the table, the list I had made only an hour earlier. "Over the past 5 years, I've provided more than $40,000 in loans, gifts, and emergency payments. Not once have I asked for repayment." Her eyebrows rose. "That's substantial." "Yes," I said. My voice cracked but held, and I thought I was giving out of love. But today, I learned I was paying rent for the privilege of being humiliated. The officer studied me for a long moment. "Mrs. Foster, did you say anything that could be interpreted as a threat?" "I told Amanda the truth," I replied. "That I won't continue enabling her control over me. That isn't a threat. That's a boundary." She nodded slowly, closed her notebook, and stood. "I don't see evidence of criminal behavior here. It sounds like a family conflict about money. I'll document the call, but you can rest easy tonight." When she left, the apartment was silent again, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't devastated the way I thought I would be. I wasn't begging to make peace. Instead, I felt clean anger. For the first time in years, I wasn't drowning in guilt. Amanda had overplayed her hand. By dragging the police into this, she had forced the truth into the open, and under scrutiny, her performance crumbled. Later that night, I sat at my computer. For years, I had told myself it was rude to pry into Amanda's past, that it wasn't my place. But now, with the echo of Officer Wells's calm voice still in my ears, I realized I knew almost nothing about the woman who had married my son. What was her maiden name again? Where had she gone to school? Where had she worked before Brian met her at that Denver coffee shop? I searched, fingers trembling, and found next to nothing. Until I stumbled onto a record. Amanda J. Mitchell, sued by a former employer in 2014 for embezzlement. My stomach clenched. The details matched too well. An office manager, accused of siphoning client accounts over 8 months. The case was settled quietly, sealed, but not before the accusation was made public. The timeline fit perfectly. The case ended in early 2015. By late 2015, Brian was introducing Amanda Mitchell as Amanda Foster. Could it be coincidence? Maybe. But then I thought of the way she insisted on managing all the household finances, the way she had isolated me, step by step, while still welcoming my checks. The way she had just called the police to silence me. This wasn't just resentment. This wasn't just dislike. This was strategy. The next day, as I sat at my table again, the phone rang. "Mrs. Foster?" The voice on the other end was brisk, official. "This is Detective Sarah Reeves with the Denver Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. We understand you've been looking into someone named Amanda Mitchell. Can I ask why?" My blood turned cold. "She's my daughter-in-law," I whispered. The detective's silence was heavy. Then, "Mrs. Foster, I think you'd better come in. There are things you need to know about her, and there are things we need to know about your connection." The world I thought I knew, my family, my son's marriage, my grandchildren's safety tilted on its axis. And for the first time, I wondered if Amanda's cruelty wasn't just personal. Maybe it was criminal. Detective Reeves's office smelled faintly of old coffee and paper. A manila folder sat on the desk, Amanda's photo clipped to the front. "Mrs. Foster," the detective began, her tone steady. "Amanda Mitchell, the woman you know as Amanda Foster, has been using multiple identities for at least 10 years. The embezzlement case you found wasn't isolated. She's been married twice before, both times draining her husband's finances before disappearing. She's wanted in 3 states for financial fraud." The words landed like stones. My heart raced, my breath shallow. This was my son's wife, the mother of my grandchildren. "What about Jake and Emma?" I whispered. They're your son's biological children," Reeves assured me. "But Amanda has a pattern. She builds a new life, extracts what she can, and when the well runs dry, she vanishes. The children in her previous marriages weren't hers, and she left them without a word." My chest tightened. I pictured Emma's soft face, Jake's stubborn loyalty. The thought of Amanda abandoning them was unbearable. But worse was knowing she had been preparing to do just that. Reeves slid photos across the desk. Amanda at a bank I didn't recognize. Amanda loading boxes into a storage unit. Amanda with a man I had never seen. "She's been preparing to disappear again," the detective said. "A secret apartment, hidden accounts. We believe she planned to leave your son within months." I closed my eyes. The cruel words at Christmas, the hostility, the lies, they were never just about me. They were about control. About tightening her grip on finances until the moment she could walk away with everything. "Mrs. Foster," Reeves continued gently, "we need your help. If you're willing, we can set up a controlled meeting. Offer her something irresistible, a large sum of money, presented as an early inheritance. If she takes the bait and reveals her hidden accounts, we'll have the evidence to arrest her." I thought of Brian, of how shattered he would be, of the children who still looked at their mother with trust. But I also thought of what would happen if I stayed silent. If Amanda succeeded in her plan, they would lose not just money, but stability, safety, everything. I nodded. "I'll do it." 3 days later, Amanda sat across from me in a quiet downtown cafe. Her smile was polished, her posture graceful, the same performance she always gave the world. "Amanda," I said, sliding a folder toward her. "I've been thinking about our conversation on Christmas. You were right about some things. I have been too involved. So I want to give you a gift, something that secures your family's future without my interference. $200,000, an early inheritance." Her eyes widened, just slightly, before she composed herself. "That's very generous." I forced a smile. "But to do it properly, I'll need all the account details, joint, personal, household. For tax purposes, of course." She hesitated only a moment before leaning in. "Brian's so busy with work, and I handle the finances anyway. I'll give you everything you need." For 20 minutes, she rattled off account numbers, balances, even details about a consulting business I'd never heard of. What she didn't know was that every word was being recorded, Detective Reeves seated only a few tables away. As Amanda scribbled one last routing number, she reached across the table and touched my hand. This is exactly the fresh start we need, Margaret. I think we misunderstood each other at Christmas. But this changes everything. I smiled back, steady. Yes, Amanda, it certainly does. The next morning, the phone rang. Brian's voice was broken, trembling. Mom, Amanda's been arrested. They say she's wanted for fraud. They say she isn't who we thought she was. I closed my eyes, the weight of both relief and sorrow pressing down. That afternoon, I sat alone in my apartment, a cup of tea warming my hands, the apple crisp finally served to myself at the right temperature. For the first time, I tasted it without bitterness. It was sweet, tart, comforting, a reminder that some traditions endure, no matter who tries to erase them. Amanda's mask had crumbled, her empire of lies exposed. Brian was devastated, yes, but free to begin again. The children were confused, but safe, and I would be there to steady them, not as a checkbook, but as a grandmother who loved them fiercely. Most importantly, I had my dignity back. At 67 years old, I learned that it is never too late to stand tall, to set boundaries, to reclaim respect. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't shouting or fighting or even proving someone wrong. It's refusing to be anyone's victim ever again.